Good afternoon, this is Chandra Easton from StarAstrologyHealing.com, continuing on with my travel videos around this ancient land, Australia. I'm travelling through the Kimberleys at the moment. You can find this series of videos my website and just search Kimberleys or Top End or Central Australia. This talks about my visit to the Windjana Gorge in the West Kimberleys. It took me a while to discover the indigenous name for Windjana Gorge is Bundlegun. Yes, and I've been doing a little bit of reading and discovered that it took, I think it was 13 years for the traditional owners, that's the Bunuba nation, fighting through the federal court in Australia a native title claim to have their lands officially put in their name so that they can care for country. This is 13 years. Well, there was one of the frontier wars that have been very poorly documented in Australia between the indigenous people and the pastoralists and the government and the white settlers that happened in the 19th century also occurred up in this area. And there's been a film made, documentary, called Windjana's War. And this tells the story of a young brave, Windjana, who's a Bunuba warrior, who had moved between the two cultures and was in crisis really to do with the loss of his culture and his people. And I think he'd worked as a station hand and he worked assisting the police of the time. And it's a long story and I can't tell you it all. I can just recommend that you go to SBS. There's a link to the interview that describes the making of the film, or you can go to ABC iView and watch the film there. The long and the short of it is that he moved between the two worlds and he was a very displaced person, and then he saw there was one point in the story where he was put in charge of guarding his own people. He was working for the police of the time, and he saw the cruelty, and some of his family, his blood, his kith and kin were being rounded up. And of course this is because the stock route was opening up through the Kimberleys and the Bunuba people were in the way, very inconvenient. So they're being rounded up and either murdered or blackbirded and sent to work basically as slaves in the pearling industry that was starting in the Kimberley region. So Bunuba was involved with this, and he couldn't stomach it, and so he led what was an armed resistance over a 10-year period. I can't remember how old he was, but I think he was either a teenager or early in his 20s. And he was pursued by the Derby police and no doubt by vigilante posses from the region that spans several hundred kilometres, 300 or 400 kilometres from Derby through what we know as the Windjana Gorge region, through Tunnel Creek down to Fitzroy Crossing. He was eventually murdered at Tunnel Creek, and he's become a hero to his people because he stood up during the frontier wars. So I'm well aware that I'm in Bunuba country, and I'm well aware of the history of the frontier wars here as I prepare to take my journey down the notorious Gib River Road. The Gib River Road is beautiful, fascinating, treacherous if you're in the wrong vehicle. And yet the only way to get to some of the seriously sacred and beautiful sites. I should say that I'm in a caravan that needs to stay on the bitumen, and I don't have a serious four-wheel drive. So any sensible person would have just gone, well, you can't go there, Chandra, but I've never been known to be sensible. So I left the caravan behind and took the car which is managed quite admirably apart from a burst tyre on the way back, and no doubt that was because of my lack of expertise in travelling these roads. It's about, what was it? I was going out on the Gib River road through Windjana, which is 141k from Derby, and out to Tunnel Creek, 175, and I think it might have been about 30, 70, 95k of that was yes, about half, a bit more than half, was seriously dreadful roads. Anyway, nothing ventured, nothing gained, and so I arrived out in this region and discovered that the Windjana Gorge and also Tunnel Creek are nothing more than a Devonian reef. It's an ancient coral reef, 360 million years old, and there are fossils there. Because this used to be a vast tropical sea that covered much of what is now known the Kimberleys, warm, shallow water, and there are marine plants and animal there and algae, and all the creatures that one would expect. And so there are still relics. You can still see the images of the fossils in the rock out there. Quite astounding, really. Yes, so this is the region where the Leonard River has carved a 3.5 long gorge through the limestone of the Napier Range. And so that's where I'd found myself. Now this Devonian barrier reef, as you can see from this map here, it stretches from north of Kununurra, where I was a few weeks ago now, all around, and encompasses the entire east and west Kimberleys to Windjana and runs out just before Derby. And somewhere I was reading that the range is simply as a result of tectonic activities, that this coral reef has been upthrust to this great height. Over goodness knows when that happened, but it's an awe-inspiring place to arrive at, and as I walked down towards the gorge, I sighted this little creature here. Now, somebody said it was a bandicoot, but I don't think so. It looks more like a wallaroo to me, but then its tail looks a bit like a possum, so a bit hard to know really. And underneath the towering gorge, the path just literally goes through the centre of the this coral reef, this upthrust coral reef, and you come out on the other side with the towering sandstone cliffs all around one. You can see the water that has carved its way through here, and it's by peering into these areas of the rock that the fossilized creatures can be found. And then I simply took the gorge walk. Yes, and I a little video to show you here of the waters. I don't know what time it was, early afternoon I think. You can see the magnitude of the cliffs above the gorge. The water's this sort of pale lime green, sort of yellow colour. Very still, very majestic, very peaceful, very old country, beautiful country. Some image here of the reflections of the trees, which simply go up the escarpment, reflected in the waters. And after bit of walking, I don't know, kilometre or so, I came to this beautiful place. Unbelievably large sandstone rocks just cast about there in the Leonard River, with the cliffs towering above. And this is a very peaceful place. I sat and observed the water and the mountain and contemplated and felt the peace, chatted to another woman who was similarly travelling on her own, and we spoke about our journeys. Here's another little video clip. Yes, you can see how panoramic it is and how beautiful. Wonderful rainbow light pouring through as the sun touches this place. Yes, this incredibly beautiful pieces of limestone, I suppose they are, just in the waters there. Yeah, there were crocodiles also. These are the freshwater crocodiles on the far bank. I couldn't manage to get any photos of those, but I got a couple of images of little crocodiles that were just sort of very visible, lazing away in the sun. This one here is just resting in the sun on a branch. I don't know if that's a baby one. It looks like a baby to me. Very sweet. You can tell that they're the crocodiles that will do you no harm because they have this sort of more pointy snout. Yes, there are lots of them. A little further along I came upon a cluster of about 15 of the the freshwater crocs, a little bit bigger they were further down, but I don't have an image of those. I think it was later, probably the following day, that I took the sunset walk in amongst the baobabs, and it was wonderful to see the baobabs that are shredding their nuts, and also to see the small baobabs growing in the shade of the larger baobabs and under the escarpment of this mighty Windjana Gorge. Bird life, and of course I'd gone down to watch the sunset, and you can see from this clip here that the light is bringing out the colours of the escarpment, gold and brown and red, and as it gets later in the afternoon it sort of seems to turn more kind of russet and ruby in places. Very peaceful, very beautiful to be at Windjana as the sun was setting, and to remember that this is the site of the Frontier Wars, and to feel very grateful that the Kimberley Land Council took all the time and effort and years that they took to fight for their native title rights for the Bunuba people in this region. This is all I've got to say about Windjana. This is Chandra from starastrologyhealing.com. Just type in Kimberley's or Top End or Central Australia and you'll find the rest of the videos. Bye for now.